sit here together for a couple of hours at least and go over one thing after another, how Billy Meier specifically predicted the climate destruction and the crisis in the world, and how underneath that is the overpopulation, where people never think about you cannot keep on adding to a finite space. But fundamentally, we are given something so that we, the simple people of this world, do not have to rely on others who may be afraid, may have vested political or economic or other interests for continuing to suppress this. Because yes, this has been going on for quite some time, officially since 1975 and even before. So you now have the ability to look. You can always write. You can contact me or the other people. How do I find this? How do I prove that? Because then you have taken responsibility for your own life and your own future, and it helps. Maybe there will be more survivors for what comes now unstoppably, because the law of cause and effect is not political, it's not religious, it's not economic, it doesn't care. Those things that Billy predicted effectively as early as 1940s and 50s, many of them now continue to fulfill. I began looking into and exploring what's called the Billy Meier UFO contacts in 1979. Got the first photo book when I lived in Los Angeles, and then it was about 7 years later that I met somebody else in a cafe in Sedona, Arizona. We started talking about phenomena and UFOs, and Billy Meier's name came up, of course. And then he asked me if I had what were called the contact reports at that time, contact notes, contact reports. I said no. He invited me to come and get them from him when I returned to L.A., which I did. I went up 1,800 pages. And I read those. This was in 1986. I read all the 1,800 pages, and I would sometimes reread, and I'd stick them under the bed. 2 years later, something happened that changed my entire focus. Because up until then, like most people who find this material, I was fascinated by the UFO evidence. It's incredible, unparalleled, authentic. But I had read conversations that Billy Meier was supposedly having with extraterrestrial human beings. In 1988, I opened up a newspaper in the little area that I was living in L.A., and it said that A-bomb testing was connected to the ozone damage and that this was a new discovery. And I read, and they have some percentages and things. But I'm saying to myself, how could I already know this? I reach under the bed, pull out the first couple 100-page blocks, volumes, and I'm going through the first one. It doesn't take very long, somewhere around the 7th contact in this 100-page block. Billy Meier is getting all of this information presented to him about the ozone damage, the percentages, the connections not only to the gases that go up, but to atomic explosions, radiation, atomic energy coming from different sources, as well as these tests, and, of course, the detonation of the nuclear bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's fascinating information. It's very detailed. There were at least 3 pages of it. They even tell him to contact a man, I think his name was Professor Michael McElroy at Harvard. Tell this man, give this man this information, send it to him. And Billy did, and of course, he never got a response. But here is this information. And so I'm reading it, and I look back at the article, and of course, Billy is talking about this in 1975, the new discovery. The new discovery from Lawrence Livermore Laboratories is in 1988. And Billy's got 3 pages of this stuff. They don't have too much in that article. Now, maybe they discovered some more, but it wasn't published. So I thought to myself, wait a minute. This is about something even more important than UFOs. Wonderful, fascinating, but I can't do anything with UFOs because nobody gives me one. So Semyaze, this extraterrestrial woman, also mentions in these pages to Billy about, well, as you knew years ago, 1950s or whatever, which I would only later come to be able to find that he had published information about the damage to the ozone and atomic energy, indeed, back in the 1950s. I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is more important than the UFOs. I would come to call this kind of information 2 things. 1, prophetically accurate scientific information, and the higher standard of proof. Now, I would also come to find, and I'll explain more about this ozone information, and you'll be able to see the cover of the book. Let me take a moment out of what I was going to say, you can argue all you want about UFO photos, sound recordings, metal samples. At the end of the day, even though you have all the experts who have authenticated already Billy's remarkable, singularly authentic evidence of extraterrestrial manufacture, skeptics can still throw things in to try to take the conversation off course. You cannot argue with a copyright, and by that I mean, in books such as these 4 volumes and a couple more that were published by Wendell Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, the lead investigator, you find scattered throughout these pages alone information previously unknown about Mars, about black holes, about every planet in the solar system. It was at this time, in 1978, actually, Billy would publish information about Jupiter and its moons. But to stay right back here for a moment, when you have a book like this and you can open it up and you look at the copyright dates, that is the legal standard of proof establishing that, not that what's in the book is necessarily true, we have to determine that. It establishes that it was published then. What's in those pages between the covers was verifiably published at that time. So in this case, when we look at these pages pertaining in 2 different contexts at least here, pertaining to the ozone damage, let's say 1975, the 7th contact, nobody's talking about damage to the ozone. Nobody's talking about the residual damage to the ozone from atomic explosions, tests, leaks of radiation from hospitals and everything else. Nobody's talking about it. How is it that this one, let's say simple, unassuming, modest, reclusive man, certainly with no access to scientific equipment that the best of our scientists would have, and they didn't, how does he know this? Not as a theory. How does he state it every time? And as you'll come to see as you investigate this for yourself, because you won't need anybody to tell you whether this is real or that's a hoax, you, using your own common sense and understanding that if something is published at a certain time, it was published at that time, you'll be able to go through this rather vast record we already have, numbering over a couple hundred examples, of where Billy Meier specifically states information as facts, never as theories, and never does he have to correct it. He doesn't redact it, edit it, correct it, remove it, apologize for it. And then you will start to find, because we've already done our due diligence, and you can do yours, you will find that our scientific experts like NASA, JPL, IBM, USGS, all of these professionals, the scientists, they did not discover this information before this man published it. I received these emails from people saying, look what just happened. This volcano became active just as Billy said it would then. This discovery, they just found 19,000 previously unknown undersea volcanoes. 1948, Billy's first teacher, Sfath, tells Billy there's hundreds of thousands of still undiscovered underwater volcanoes that are very active. Then he also says in 1948, in the future between 2015 and 2017, and yes, I'm going to move around a little bit because you can rewind this and watch it again and go and just check everything out. Between 2015 and 2017, in central Italy, there will be very, very strong earthquakes, extremely strong. And they will be precursors to events that will follow, and he didn't say when they follow, but they will follow during this millennium, of the eruption of 5 major volcanoes in Italy, and I don't have it in front of me, Mount Vesuvius, Mount Etna, Mount Marsili, Stromboli, and Campi Flegrei, I think it's called. They will become very active, and Campi Flegrei is a caldera, and it will, when it erupts, parts of Italy may actually go into the water. Well, we'll see. Nothing's happened yet, except 2 things. Between 2015 and 2017, as you can verify for yourself, those earthquakes took place. And not only that, they are reported as the strongest earthquakes ever to hit that region. And then what happened? In the past few years, all of those volcanoes have started to become more active, starting to flare up. And not only that, but there's a place in northern Germany described also in 1948 by Sfath called the Eiffel Fields in northern Europe, which is a huge caldera. And of course he says this will become a sea of fire. Well, so far we see no action. Just like, well, Yellowstone in America, huge caldera, it will erupt. And that will be one of the greatest catastrophes to occur on the planet in history. So far, well, they're seeing stirrings, and there was even recently in the news some unexpected activity, temperature changes and all. Some of these things give early indications. Another one, since we're speaking about volcanoes and earthquakes, in about 2005, if my memory serves me, Ptah tells Billy that there will be, with certainty, a 9.0 Seaquake, 9.0, that goes for 5 minutes straight and generates a massive tsunami that will come in, let's say, the overall area of Portland. This will be in what's called the Cascadia subduction zone. It will run from Washington. The effect will go all the way down through Southern California. 9.0, and then another Seaquake and another tsunami. Now, there is historical precedent from perhaps a couple centuries ago of a massive Seaquake and tsunami, and it moved all the way back to Japan. That effect of it, when it withdrew from impacting in the great Northwest, off it went towards Japan. In 2008, 3 years later, Oregon State University came out with of course, a new discovery. What was that new discovery? There will be at some point in the near future a 9.0 Seaquake and a tsunami, and the Seaquake could run for several minutes. Well, we already have been warned about that, and we, the people associated with this material who care, publish and send it around to warn people. This is the tip of the tip of the tip of the proverbial iceberg. In 1981, let's just let it move freely here, Billy Meier meets with the Plejaren, and they inform him that there's an object coming from the depths of outer space. For the first time into our solar system, they say. They call it the red meteor. They say this is on a path directly towards the Earth, trillions and trillions of kilometers out there. It's on a pathway to come by the Earth. And they give dates. I think they gave the dates after 81, but they described this object and where it would threaten the Earth, saying that should this be allowed to impact, should our scientists not do, I'll tell you what the recommendation is in a minute, if this is allowed to come through either on April 13th, 2029 or April 13th, 2036, this is going to slam into the Earth, this rather large object, and the results will be devastating in the immediate area and will spread around the world in many ways. Lots of bad consequences. Now, just so you know, NASA discovered this object in 2004. 2004. 23 years later. And they call it Apophis, asteroid Apophis. And of course, according to NASA, it's posing no danger. It'll fly by April 13th, 2029, and April 13th, 2036. But what did the Plejaren also tell Billy Meier? They told him that your scientists must come together. This is potentially a major catastrophe for your planet. Not that this is the biggest object. Billy was told it's approximately 350 meters. Now, NASA came out with a finding also on the size of the object, and then a few years later, they changed their size estimate to within 10 meters of what Billy published and didn't have to change. So the Plejaren also said, your scientists must come together and deflect the object. Don't blow it up. Our suggestion, they said, the best thing, because Billy was also speaking about, well, should they try to use a solar sail, this, that. And Ptah said, in our estimation, your best option for protection is to launch a missile, a large rocket, with a nuclear charge, detonate it a distance from the incoming object, just enough to create a shock wave far enough out to nudge it just a little bit, because you change something way out here a little bit, and then by the time it's way over here, it doesn't endanger you. Well, the Russians apparently follow Billy's information. That is my own conclusion, and some others have determined the same thing. Why? Because they came out with a finding, the Russian Space Agency, suddenly, after this material is published, they come out saying, we need to deflect Apophis. We need to do something to deflect it and not try to blow it up. And they invited the Chinese to participate. Well, from my understanding, it may not be correct. The U.S. may not be allowed technically to put a rocket into space with a nuclear charge. So the Russians can, or the Chinese, or somebody else, but our space agency should be cooperating. We should have an international cooperation for the best minds, setting aside any kind of partisanship to protect our world from this incoming object. Otherwise, we are told with certainty it comes in and strikes between the North Sea and the Black Sea, impacts and creates huge explosion. Gases are released from the Earth. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions can occur. Nuclear power plants, why? They're all over now. Those things could be damaged, releasing radiation everywhere. What if it hits somewhere where one country or another has stockpiled nuclear weapons? This comes back to how the individual can now take advantage of the democratization of research that the internet affords us. We can be a 10-year-old child at a computer or a 60-year-old man or woman. We can go online, and yes, there is bad information, but there is also very credible, scientifically vetted, corroborated, verified information. And we can start to put this information abilities into the process. Now, yes, we have many pages. We will show you where you can see what we've done, but you have to take responsibility. The truth is that while we did all the diligence and vetting we could when we would come across something, it wasn't that we would read all of Billy's prophecies and then go to look and see, did Billy predict it? What happens is articles appear in the news, on the internet, radio, television, newspapers, and then people contact us, or we just, as others do, we read something and say, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. So what we do is we go to find what Billy published, and then we look at the scientific information when it was published first. Because there are things that Billy's published and warned about that actually scientists did know about beforehand. So we're not trying to make him an all-knowing source. It's good enough that we have about 250 error-free examples, but we want to find the ones that you can also go just like we did. We're not, most of us are not scientists. There are some scientists involved. There's people who are former NASA aerospace engineers and people who worked in the aerospace industry and even mathematicians from the Pentagon. People who have come together, communicate with each other, are saying, this is remarkable. And the scientists these days will want to deny that. They will say it can't be. But you don't need anybody's. A scientist could say it's true. You don't have to take their word for it. They could say it's not true. The ones that you can check out, and as I said, there's lots of them, you can find out for yourself when it either appeared in a published book, and there's lots of that, or when it was first published online. You have the Wayback Machine. There's different ways of proving this. You can find out. So if we have something on a website that says, Billy said this then, at this date and time, well, first find out, when did we publish that? Then you look for the link to Billy's information and see, can we verify that? Then you can start to determine for yourself if this might be a body of information, of material, that you, we, and all of us could benefit from learning. You see, in the world of ufology, nobody ever asks the really important question. If this is true, if there's a contact, what's the reason for it? Well, I can tell you, it's not for you and me to chase lights in the sky, and it's not for me as somebody that lectures about this to make a career. That's not the purpose of what Billy Meier has been working with for 80 of 86 years of his life, or 81 years now, actually. It's to help us assure our own obviously very threatened future survival. Jump for a second here. In 1987, Billy Meier is warning about computer-based weapons. What does that mean? AI. 1987. And he's warning that unknown at this time, in 1987, laser and biological and chemical weapons and computer-based weapons not only pose great dangers, but the computer-based weapons will be able to take the power to themselves and threaten all of humankind. Now, recently, in the past even year or so, some of the more forward and thinking, honest people have said, this AI thing could become very dangerous to humankind. Well, Billy already published those warnings, and he published them in the same document where he warns about the United States and Russia clashing in a huge war, with other countries siding with Russia, Asian countries, and third world countries, against the Western powers. Are we paying attention to the news these days? America has effectively illegally already declared war against Russia. In 2017, Billy Meier publishes a document about America will launch attacks against Russia from a place in Germany. A year or two later, America announced cooperation, I believe it's with NATO, for a base in that location in Germany. But there's more to it. And this gets more and more interesting. In this same 1987 document, it's called the Hinterschmidrüti prophecies. It also says Russia will move its troops to Arkhangelsk in preparation for attacks against Scandinavia. Now, let's be honest here about dates and things. 1987 is when that was first expressed in German. It didn't come out in English until 2002, and this will be important for one of the next things I tell you. But let's go back first to Arkhangelsk. That's 2002. It's in there in English. In 2011, I get an internet news, and it says the Russians have moved forces to Arkhangelsk. At that point, I chose to send that information to someone I'd known for over 50 years, a retired physician and physicist who was a skeptic about Billy Meier case. I'd reunited my connection with him, and, oh, how are you? Let's talk about other things. And I said, Billy Meier, no. I sent it to him. His name was Sanford Weinstein. Sandy. Hey, Sandy, here. Michael, come over. Bring your camera. Okay. He goes on camera. I just want to say that this man, Billy Meier, he's not a crazy person. He's not a schizophrenic. We should listen to this man. How would he have thought about this in 2002? I, Dr. Weinstein, I was in the military. I know this area. We flew over it. It's under almost year-round cloud cover. It's the perfect staging area for an attack, even to come into America. Well, how interesting you should say that, Dr. Weinstein. In the Hinterschmidrüti prophecies, it's foretold that that attack by Russia, that they will come into the U.S. through Canada, Alaska and Canada, into the U.S. in this prophesied attack. Should it take place? It's a prophecy. It's not guaranteed. But how would he name that particular, how would he, Arkhangelsk, Billy Meier, 1987, Switzerland. He's foreseeing Russian troop movements. Well, okay, why would he predict that they're going to attack Scandinavia, Norway and Sweden and Finland, but not Denmark, because they're not a significant country? Well, what do Norway, Sweden, and wasn't there a lot of neutrality between these countries? Yeah, until when? Until recently, when they wanted to join NATO, and the American effort to foment a war with Russia was pushing people to align with NATO and to do this and to do that. Now, Finland, Sweden, Norway, hostile to Russia. And with the Nord Stream pipeline, I cannot put this into the material. I can only say there is talk, certainly in a number of circles, including military ones, that Norway, with the help of the U.S., did this sabotage on the Russian pipeline. Well, there's another thing among many in the Hinterschmidrüti prophecies that otherwise would be, nonsense. What is that? Billy Meier is told that there will be an attack in the United States that will destroy the WTC, the World Trade Center, and they say by terrorists. Well, whoever those terrorists may be, those were terrorists that attacked the WTC. We're not involved with the conspiracies. Subsequent information from Meier and Patah explained how the buildings actually came down, but many people want to stay with the other beliefs. The important thing is, it's in this document, and it's foretold that this is only the first of things that will happen to the USA that will be unbelievable to the people of Earth. I don't look forward to that. But naturally, a person could say, yes, but this is only published in 2002. He backdated it. I don't think so. It's so simple to reason your way. He's describing the AI. He's describing the computerized and biological, chemical, laser weapons. He specifically mentions the troop movements from Russia, Arkhangelsk specifically. And here, even if Billy could have published this all in 2002, then forget about the WTC if you want. But this is now ironclad. And there's another thing, and it certainly is important to Billy and the people in his country. One of the last things foretold in the anti-prophecies is that Switzerland would give up its neutrality and thereby ultimately invite destruction in its own, formerly known as the land of peace, beautiful country. It's there in writing. And why in 87? No indications. None. No indications. Norway, Finland, Sweden, Switzerland. This that we've just gone over is just the tip of the iceberg.